Okay. This is Burn This Book, a banned books book club where we, Nicolle and Eden, read a banned or challenged book twice a month and discuss its meaning, impact, and censorship to make it more accessible for all readers. This month's book is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which was published in 1953. Joining us today is Natalie Christensen in Salt Lake City. Natalie, tell us a bit about yourself and your connection to the book.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I taught high school English and special education in New York City for 4 years, did middle school for 1 year, and then high school for 3 years. So I taught this book. I think I taught it 3 years in a row. And so that's kind of my biggest connection to this book. And then I used it for part of my thesis topic also, which I think we'll probably get into a little bit more later.
Yeah, definitely.
We love that.
Well, yeah, give us a little hint of what was your thesis on?
Yeah, just a little teaser.
I just did my thesis on how to make required text more culturally and socially relevant to students reading them, since there's so many books that students have to read that are just kind of part of this rote curriculum that sometimes students get really into the book, sometimes they're not interested at all, which would probably be true of any book, but especially sometimes these books that are this one was written in I think 1951, and lots of whiteness in a lot of these books. I taught a lot of kids of color, so I was just interested in how to make books feel really relevant and pertinent to their lives.
That's really cool.
Ooh. Yeah, I want to hear how you brought in Fahrenheit 451.
Mm-hmm.
So Fahrenheit 451 was kind of an easy sell for this, because it is so when you read it, it's just kind of this unnerving and eerily canny of how similar it feels to so many modern day life things. And I think this issue of censorship is evergreen, and especially right now, but even when I taught this book in the late 2010s, it still felt really evergreen. But we talked about I would show them. We would watch Beyonce's Formation video. I can't remember what year it came out, but it was around that time that music video came out. And then there was a lot of response to that video and cultural backlash of people then boycotting Beyonce shows, or some cops. Maybe this happened all over the country, but I specifically remember, I think it was in Florida. Some cops refused to do security for her show because of that video, because she talks about police brutality and, Black Pride. And I don't think they were necessarily boycotting the Black Pride piece, but boycotting that idea of police brutality being a thing. Anyway, so we would watch that and just kind of talk about this relationship of who's censoring who, and how do we censor each other, and how do systems and organizations enforce censorship or censor each other. So, anyway, yeah.
I love that. Before we get deeper into the themes, because those are very fascinating, and that's the whole essence of this book, especially from an institutional level of who's censoring who. Let's do a quick little summary of this cute book. This cute book. It's so good.
A very cute book.
A very darling, little, charming book.
Mm-hmm. Adorable, yes. So charming.
It's so charming. I'm just going to pull a plug. I'm just going to say that Ray Bradbury is probably one of my favorite authors of all time. I think he's a prophet. I think he knows. I think he saw, and he is very willing to talk about things, and he understood how far problems could go. And he really shows that with this book. Who feels comfortable with a little summary?
I prepped one, sort of, so I can kind of try to conversationally read it.
Nice.
Let's do it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's too long. It's 2 paragraphs.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so in this book, the protagonist's name is Guy Montag. He's a fireman, and he's living in a society where all books are banned and burned, and so as a fireman, this is part of his job. And he's married to a woman named Mildred. She's kind of dead inside. She's pretty bland, boring, feels like she doesn't have a lot of personality. She watches TV all day and calls people on TV her family. And so one day, like right at the beginning of the book, he meets a neighbor girl who's like 17, and she's really curious and inquisitive, and she's like this deep thinker, and he starts chatting with her, and she asks him if he ever reads any of the books he burns, and he's like, no, of course not. And as they're kind of talking and chatting, we get a sense of the society they live in now. Like, it's really fast paced. There's no time to stop and enjoy nature. He doesn't even notice that there's like dew on the grass in the morning. She asks Guy if he's happy, and he's like, what? Of course I'm happy. But then as he goes home that night and thinks on it, he's like, I'm really not happy. And he comes home, finds that his wife is overdosed. Doctors pump her stomach. They comment on how this type of thing happens all the time. His wife's like really nonplussed. So there's just kind of this like weird world we're living in. Obviously some similarities to our world, but anyway, so that kind of sets up the world. He really realizes something's wrong when he is sent to this other woman's house to burn her books, and she chooses to die instead of giving up her books. So he decides to steal a book because he's kind of intrigued. Like, why would somebody die for this? And his boss, the fire chief, is suspicious, visits him. The fire chief tries to explain why books are bad and why they burn them. This only serves to pique Montag's interest, which, you know, sounds familiar. And so he wants to try to read and understand books. He eventually gets turned into the fireman. He's ordered to burn his house down. He refuses, escapes the city, makes it to the countryside. There's all these intellectuals hanging out, and they're like memorizing books, committing them to memory so they can save them and preserve them. And then the book basically ends with like a bomb falling on the city, and Montag and these intellectuals head back to the city hoping to rebuild based on like knowledge and kind of making this new world.
Yeah, that was excellent. Also, spoilers.
Oh, spoilers. Maybe I shouldn't. Should I do another one without spoilers?
No, that's perfect. Eden and I do spoilers every episode, but we just never say it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just
lots of spoilers. The whole book.
The whole book. But also, if you didn't read it in high school, what is happening in this world?
Yeah, I feel like it's too late for you to get a spoiler anyway.
Yeah. Gosh, that was so good.
Such a good
Eden,
book.
did you have... It's such a good book. I don't even know where to start, honestly.
Yeah.
It is crazy, to your point, Nicolle, about how prophetic it is. Like, I just feel like it's very, I don't know, just like very astute and like a way I don't think at all. I feel like I could never predict something like this, but I don't know.
I think it's kind of like a 2-in-1 kind of situation too. It's not just about books, it's about television as well. And I know that Ray Bradbury was kind of anti-TV in the beginning because he could see like what TV could do to people and whether or not that could pull people away from reading books and what a world without books looks like. But yeah, on this read, this is my third time reading it. Like, I really got the parasocial relationship that, like, Mildred had with the family. Like, she calls them her family. And, like, how often do we catch up with, keep up with the Kardashians or something like that because we feel, like, part of their family or something like that. Or, like, very much about how, like, media... just how media... can't, if we don't critically think, it could shape how, like, everything that we think about, or how we view things or our own opinions or how to think and stuff like that. I was really... go for it.
No, you finish.
I'm kind of, like, all over the place because I have so much to say about this book. I love this book. But I was really drawn to the fire chief this time around, how he seems to be a very interesting character because he knows books and he quotes them back to Guy quite a lot. And I was wondering what you guys thought about that. He kind of like almost weaponizes books to prove like, look at how terrible books are. Like,
yeah. I mean, it feels like there are a lot of people in power right now who are banning books who, like, know exactly what they're doing and, like, probably are really familiar with these books and are, like, well-educated people who have gone to, like, prestigious schools and, like, in another world wouldn't find any problem with, this book or that book that they're banning. But I think because right now we're dealing with such intense, like, culture wars and, like, politicians who know their base and know what they want and are sometimes praying, not all the times, but sometimes praying to a base that is less knowledgeable about certain things or more ignorant to certain things. And I think it is very calculated and very, very deliberate.
Something I was also thinking about when you were talking about like TV, like, because I make a joke where I'm like, yeah, TV raised me because I love television so much. It is my best friend. So it just kind of, it is scary. And the Kardashians really did become a big part of my life. But I remember the first time I read this book, it was like right around the time that iPods were a thing. And I would like go, I bought like saved up my money and I bought an iPod. And I remember like laying in bed with like headphones in and falling asleep to music. And the next day reading that part where Mildred puts her like buds into her ears. She just tunes out the entire world and she goes to sleep and she ODs. And we don't know if it's intentional or if it's just accidental because she's so not present with life. And I remember being like, holy cow, I'm Mildred. And that's when I was like, Ray is a prophet. Like, how did he know we were going to put stuff in our ears and fall asleep to them? And like, and giant TVs and just like completely, like I'm trying right now not to watch TV one day a week. And it is breaking me. I had no idea how hard it is. Like I am an addict to very weak storytelling. But yeah, I like it is so wild to me how much of Mildred there is in me and the way I live my life right now. And that's what's really scary.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to Eden's point too, like talking about television and how like if you're not thinking critically, you can get sucked in or whatever. But even when you're thinking critically, like getting sucked into stories, but even just like I'm thinking of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and like I think that like I could watch that show and be like really critique it and be like, these, like, here's all these things that are wrong with like celebrity or wealth or whatever, but still my brain is like seeing really skinny bodies or seeing a lifestyle that's appealing, and like whether I'm thinking critically about that or not, it's still like making me want that or affecting me in some way. You know what I mean? Like I noticed that like just even on Instagram, like having so much more body inclusivity on Instagram, like that's also affecting me. Like I notice how much more normal it is for me now to see like a body that's not like stick skinny and not thinking about it as much because I'm more used to seeing that now, which like, thank goodness. Right. Yeah. But like when I'm scrolling Instagram, I'm not necessarily being a critical thinker. Sometimes I am, but sometimes it's just like, you know, I'm just like letting these images get into my mind and affect me, you know?
We're not actively engaging in it. We're just passively. Yeah. And I think that's where it gets really, like, it gets really scary. There's this researcher named Sarah Coyne, and she studies family health and things like that. And she has this whole thing about Instagram that the passive use is so bad for our mental health. Active use can build community and can be really good for your mental health. So Instagram's not evil, but when we're passively interacting, I guess you're not even interacting if you're doing it passively, but like when you're passively, you know, witnessing these things, it's just like, it's so interesting. And you also see like Guy lived very passively until he met that teenage girl, kind of like that kind of woke him up to being like an OD is really serious. You should be aware if your wife is suicidal or if it was just like an accident because she didn't know how many she took. Like that's so scary, and that's like kind of the way it's like presented. It's just like such like people are not living their lives at all.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, like going back to like the propheticness of this book. Like Clarice mentions how she's afraid of kids her own age, with like shootings and reckless driving, and we see an example of reckless driving later on. Like these kids were driving so fast, almost hit Guy, and turned around to try and actually hit him again, or attempt to hit him again. And yeah, it's like the lack of, because like books equal empathy, right? Because right, we all know this simple equation that books equal empathy, and so like this
equals better human being.
Yeah, and so like And I know that like reading levels are kind of low in the United States now, and it has been going down. And I wonder if, well, I don't want to speculate too much, but you know, like Ray Bradbury is speculating, like if these things go away in our lives, if these books go away in our lives, kids will start getting scarier in a lot of ways. Granted, like we could prevent a lot of things like gun control laws and stuff like that, but in this society, yeah.
That's kind of connected to it too. Like I think that like, yeah, he's saying like, look, this like society can collapse without these things. And I think it kind of goes back to like what I was saying earlier about like people are very deliberate about this, you know. Actually kind of just lost my train of thought, dang it.
Oh, no worries.
Maybe it'll come back to me.
It'll come back.
And we'll edit it right back in.
On that note,
I'll see if I think of it.
Yeah, while you think about it, it also makes me think that this is probably why these book bannings are so successful right now, is because we do have so much apathy about books. I think maybe in another generation when we didn't have so much access to TV and entertainment at our fingertips, you know, like, because I stopped reading books like around college, but also it was when like streaming services became like a big thing, because it's a lot easier just to sit down and just like turn on Netflix. Whereas before, like it would, you know, there was like specific times that your shows were going to be on. Things were kind of mapped out at different, you know, and I couldn't afford a TV, so I didn't even have one. So I read a lot more until streaming happened, and then my computer became my TV, and now my phone is my TV. And so it's like the attachment to books is no longer as involved, and I think it's a lot easier for people to ban books because less people are going to fight about it. There's like a few people that are really angry, you know, but I think generally, like, I just feel like there's a lot of people that are like, well, okay, I'm not a big book reader anyways, like, whatever. That's not the fight they're going to push for. And I think we just don't realize the implications of when you ban books, you're just giving permission to continue that censorship on massive other levels. And it's the first step to, like, and this sounds so ridiculous, but it's true. And it's scary that it's true, but it's the first step to a fascist society, to a completely controlled society. What themes, like, because we all read, I'm making an assumption. Did you read this in high school, Natalie?
Oh, I actually don't remember if I did. I don't know.
When was the first time you read it? Yeah. Do you think?
I mean, I feel like when I taught it, I had read it before, which makes me think I had read it in high school. Because this is not like the type of book, like to the point of my thesis, this is like not the type of book that I would necessarily, I mean, now I would gravitate towards it, but like in high school, I probably wouldn't have been necessarily interested in it on my own. So maybe high school. I mean, definitely my memories with it are like more just teaching it a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't remember like initial thoughts of reading it.
Fascinating.
Did you guys read it in high school?
Yeah, and I definitely was like very much like moved. This book like changed me.
Yeah.
I was like, holy cow, I like dystopian literature. Uh-huh. I had no idea. Yeah. Eden, what was your experience?
Same. I read it in high school. For an English class. And yeah, I reread it a couple years ago too. That was my first time rereading it, and just like how simple the plot is, but how impactful it is as well. Like when Natalie, you gave that summary, I was just like, yeah, that's pretty much all that happens. But like, yeah. But like so much
Yeah. Did your impressions, like, as you both have read this book multiple times, have your impressions changed? Like, are there new things? Eden, you said that the fire chief really stuck out to you this time. Mm-hmm. Like, what has that journey been each time you've read it? And as our society, it continues to change as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Natalie, if you have something off the top of your head, go for it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if there's like new illuminations when I've read it most recently, but I do think that it's like, and I kind of already said this too, but just like whenever I do read it, it's just so interesting and like unnerving that like how eerily modern it feels and how many problems it illuminates that we still have going on today. And I don't know enough about history. Like, maybe part of it is sort of like cyclical. Like, I think people who sometimes are able to like predict or like be like, this is going to happen, it's because they have a strong understanding of history, and just kind of like the cyclical cycle of like the same issues kind of come and go. But yeah, I just think it's like, it's weird reading a book that was written in the 50s and be like, oh, this is like a, what's the word? A commentary on today's society, you know? Like, that's always a weird feeling.
Yeah. It's jarring. Seriously, I am Mildred. Like, at least 6 days a week, I'm Mildred, and it is terrifying. Like, how much ibuprofen and Excedrin I'm just popping because of my, like, health stuff, and it's just, like, it's unnerving to think, and it's just such a reminder of, like, oh, a solution would be to unplug, be a human being. And that's also what's crazy about this book. I feel like the solutions are so obvious. It's just like, unplug, keep reading, and like, I don't know. It also just, I always thought it was so crazy, the idea of the old lady burning with the books. And then like thinking about the Holocaust and other things and other experiences. Like, I don't know if this happened during the revolution in China, where like, I don't know if there were a lot of books burned, but I know that like control. Yeah. So, and in Russia and all these other places. And like, I just feel like it's not a crazy idea to think that might happen here eventually. And I think that we have to be okay with that fact that we're not immune to this future, and we have to do something about it. And that woman could be any of us. And that's like a really scary, jarring thing too. Like, all these things in this book are so real. And like, yeah, it's kind of that feeling of when I read Handmaid's Tale, where I was like, oh, fascinating, especially after the insurrection. It was like, oh, that's how Handmaid's Tale, like, that's how that world was created, was through an insurrection on the government. And then all these like really conservative people did this thing. And it was just like, oh, like, that was really unnerving. It's just jarring to realize like we're not immune. And once again, I'm using a lot of words to say very little, but that's been my most recent read was like, oh shoot, Ray, what would you say if you were alive today? Poetry. Lots of rhymes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Eden, did you have any additional thoughts about that?
Yeah, I read this book, this read around, I remember I was trying to read it from the perspective of an acquaintance of mine who, she cited this book as the reason why she was voting for Trump. So that was really interesting. And so I had a very specific mindset going in. And there were a few things that the fire chief does, and that's probably why the fire chief stood out to me. It's because a few things that he said that I think, taken out of context, could be pro-Trump, you know, or like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
that illusion of freedom above all things.
Freedom above all things. He also has like a whole spiel about minorities, about how like the more minorities say that, oh, my feelings are hurt about this, then we censor that. Or my feelings are triggered by that, then we censor that, or something like that. And to a degree, it is true, but I don't think Ray Bradbury agrees with the fire chief, right? This is a guy who is well educated. Like you were saying, Natalie, this is a politician or someone who is well educated and knows these things. And yet he chooses to kind of inflame culture wars of like, oh yeah, like minorities are crushing all of us. And then there was a line later where, shoot, I forgot who it was. Oh, the Faber, the guy who helps Montag escape the city. He says something along the lines of like, oh, the suffocating nature that is the majority. So like it's really interesting just seeing the arguments there, where again, if taken out of context, could be like, I do feel yeah. I'm still trying to form my thoughts, but like, I think either extreme is probably also talking about the extremes as well, of like, if we constantly cater to people who feel like they're not heard, then what are we left with? But then if we only cater to the majority, then there's nothing left, or something like that. I don't know. Still forming my thoughts around that.
I think it's interesting. Good. Like, I feel like, I don't know if you saw my face when you were like, oh, my acquaintance read this and that's what made them vote for Trump. And I felt like really surprised, but it's like anything that we read or consume, we can figure out a way that it aligns with our worldview, you know? So I think like, yeah, it's like, shouldn't it be surprising at all? Like, of course, somebody who's on the other side of what I believe can read the same thing I'm reading and take a completely different message away from it, which is also kind of scary. But that's also like why books shouldn't be banned, is because we should all be able to have access to these things and like come away with our own thoughts and feelings. And sometimes things do change our mind, you know, like sometimes books and literature and art do have that ability. I mean, they absolutely have that ability to like change us as well. But yeah, it's also easy to just kind of read into things what you want to read into them.
Yeah. And I think that's also why it's important to have these books taught. I think having schools, having that structure is really helpful because, yeah, like you guys said, it is critical to, like, it can be interpreted in any way. And I think that speaks to a lot of people's education or understanding. And, like, there is that fallacy of, like, that belief system that was really used by Trump to justify people being mad at minorities for speaking loudly about their issues, because they're like, they're just complaining, this isn't the issue of everyone, they're going to ruin it for everybody. And that idea that these voices are censoring, making it impossible for people like Trump to say what he really means to say. So the word censorship is also really interesting, because when we're looking at it, and I think a lot of people don't understand freedom of speech at all, because they think it's like, I can say whatever I want anytime. And they don't understand that it's just like it protects you from the government harming you. It's the thing that protects you from the government. And that there are limitations to freedom of speech as well. And so I think this also speaks to, like, what does censorship actually mean? And just some context, Ray Bradbury wrote this during the second Red Scare and the McCarthy era. And he was inspired by book burnings in Nazi Germany and the ideological repression in the Soviet Union. And he also talks about, like, he had a lot of different, like, interviews from, like, the 1950s up until the 1990s, where he kept changing his understanding of what his book's really about. So in the 1950s, he was like, I wrote this because there was a huge threat of book burning in the United States. Later on, he was like, this is actually a book about how mass media reduces interest in reading literature. And then in the 90s, he cited political correctness as an allegory for the censorship in the book, calling it the real enemy these days, which would be that Trump justification. And he said that political correctness he labeled political correctness as thought control and freedom of speech control. And I wonder if he had that understanding now, if he looked at this book now, if he would still agree with that statement about political correctness. Because I think, like, I don't know. I just think there's value. There's value to know the full truth of something, of our history, and not to just take out what we're like, ugh. Like, I do think political correctness, what does that even mean also? Because we also use that as a buzzword to justify just getting angry at people. Yeah, I don't know. I want the whole world to just have, like, really clear definitions of each of these things.
Yeah, it's just, like, you mentioning that censorship, the First Amendment. We're talking about Second Amendment so much in public discourse. Sorry. The First Amendment is about the government censoring you're protected from the government censoring you, which is interesting considering how politicians are the ones passing. Like, I'm thinking of one specific politician. Well, two. Texas and Florida, you know.
Yeah, you can say their names. It's okay.
And how there isn't much of an uproar, it seems. Well, there are in, like, the book community, but there's no uproar about them censoring versus, like, Facebook, which is a private company, and, like, we can talk about how terrible that is on an ethical point, but, like, technically it is not covered by the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And yet everyone's up in arms about private companies, and yet they're kind of like, whatever, about politicians. That's government.
Yeah, it's infuriating. I know, Eden, you have to go in 2 minutes.
I do. You guys feel free to carry on the conversation.
Because I have another question for Natalie. I would like to hear how you would teach this book now this year, especially given what you studied in your thesis. Like, how would you make this better?
Really quick, I'm going to log off, but I would also love to hear which books you guys would... Well, you talk amongst yourselves. You can edit this part out. Talk amongst yourselves, and I want to hear what books you guys would want to memorize if we ever came to that society. Anyway.
Oh, wait. Do you want to tell us what books you want to do?
To memorize a book.
Yeah.
I know. If I had to choose a book, it would be The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, I think. By Sherman Alexie. At first I was going to choose
never read that.
Cloud Atlas,
Natalie,
but that's so thick.
So
yeah.
That's so thick. That's a good one. I need to think about that.
But yeah, I recommend that book.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, you can leave.
Okay,
Eden.
see ya.
Eden, nice
meeting you. Bye.
Nice chatting with you.
See ya.
And I promise I won't keep you too long, Natalie. But I am so curious about, like, how you wove that into your thesis, and, like, and just how you would try to make this more accessible for students.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question and a hard question. I mean, I feel like this is just, like, an easy answer, but, like, I think I would just, like, dive into talking about what's going on right now and, like, finding all the parallels that we can find. I feel like it would be, like, impossible to teach this without just, like, naturally talking about all that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And I think also, like, to your point, like, this is why, like, it's so important that that schools and teachers do teach books like this. And, like, of course, there's always going to be people who are like, yeah, because they can brainwash our kids or whatever. But it's like, no, they're, like, teaching them to think critically. Like, and, like, it's not like students are always revering you. There's, like, plenty of students who just want to disagree with you, you know, or, like, want to find the other side of things. Like, I think that, like, a classroom fosters a perfect space to be able to, like, for you to be challenged, for a teacher to challenge their students, for, like, challenge to be, like, really reciprocal and like learn how to think and learn how to talk through these things in a way that is, like, smart and kind and rational, and you know what I mean, not angry. And anyway, so I think this book would, like, obviously just, like, lend perfectly to current events and what's going on.
I mean, that's what's so crazy about this book, is it's so obvious. Like, it's so clearly, once again,
it's, like, very
the profit thing. Yeah, it's very...
Which is also, like, a nice thing for high school students, right? Like, sometimes to just, like, read stuff that's, like, there's, like, deep things in this book and, like, a lot of intellectual conversations to be had, but it's not, like, hard to figure out what they are, you know? Like, it's very clear what the themes are in this book. Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah.
We all need that sometimes.
We need everyone to read it. Did you have any other, like, feelings about this book, or things that you were like, this is something that I would really like to share with people about this book or about this topic?
I don't know. I think it's, like, the same thing I keep saying. I just think it's, like, crazy how, like, like you said, like, how prophetic it feels and how current and modern it feels when it was written so long ago. I am curious about why it was banned. I actually don't know why it's been banned. I feel like I could make an assumption. I mean, it feels like it would be banned. Like, this feels like a perfect book to be banned right now, right? Like, just like this is like extreme and it's like not relevant and it's like liberals are freaking out about this and it's not a big deal. Like, that's kind of what I would think, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. So actually, you're like completely dead on. So it was first banned in the 1950s, but in apartheid South Africa.
Interesting.
And they were burning and banning all these other books. So of course they were gonna burn and ban a book that was critical of burning and banning.
It seems like so crazy.
Yeah,
like doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, feel like you'd be like, yeah, sure, we'll burn all these books, but of course we won't burn the one about, like, it's just, like, too obvious, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah. But I also feel like when you're burning that many books or banning that many books, like, it's pretty easy for books to get lost in the shuffle. Like, that's been surprising to me is, like, how many books are on the list of banned and, like, challenged that I've been like, holy cow, that has been? Like, I feel like you have to have, like, a constant notification going on your phone, like a push notification, like every time another book is banned or challenged, because like I just would have no idea because they're just doing it all the time in all these different counties. And
it's just like I just like don't understand like we know that banning books just makes people interested in them, so like it feels almost like it's like it almost feels like it's like this thing of like, oh, we're gonna ban books because we want you to read them, but that's like absolutely not what's going on. But it's what's happening.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway.
Well, that's the Billy Joel thing. Billy Joel claims that he became a real star when the Catholic Church banned his song "Only the Good Die Young," because that's when people found out about him, and all the young people went and bought that album. Was because the Catholic Church was outspoken about the song "Only the Good Die Young." So it was like so good for him. It gave him like all the publicity that he needed as an early star. And like, so
that's really funny.
Yeah, so the reason why it's currently banned in the U.S., according to the American Library Association, is because of adult themes. They talk about sexuality, drugs, and suicide. But before...
Do they even talk about sexuality? I feel like hardly, but whatever.
I don't feel like it
feels like an easy one.
I feel like that's an easy one. And in the 80s, it was banned, though, for being... Wait, no. That was for Catch-22, excuse me. Who am I? Okay, let me find Fahrenheit.
It's also so interesting,
Weird.
like you're saying, like banned for drugs, and then I think about like what you were saying that also feels like relatable about like, yeah, like everyone's like taking ibuprofen. That's like very like that's not like, I mean, maybe it's not like the best thing in the world, but it's also not like scary. Like it's fine.
Really harmless.
And obviously we do have like dependency on other drugs and stuff, but it feels, I don't know, if anything, it just feels helpful to be like reading a book like this. Like if you don't want to be talking about drugs or you don't want drugs to be a thing, it feels like read a book like this where you're like, oh, I don't want to be numb to life, or like, I don't know, it just feels so counterintuitive all the time.
Seriously, that's what's so crazy is like I feel like the people, well, we know this, the people that ban books often have not actually read the book. And so that's the thing is like, especially during the opioid crisis, you know, like, which we're still in. We pretend it's over, just like we pretend the pandemic's over. But like, we're still in it. It just looks differently than it did in 2000. And so like it's so topical. Like the idea of people just popping in lots of pills to take care of pain, to numb themselves, and who are clearly, like, Mildred is clearly an addict. And, like, you don't have to use that word to, like, you know, like, he didn't have to use the word addict in order for us to understand, like, oh, she's dependent on these drugs. Because she, like, pop them right before bed, in the morning, like, throughout the day, and she, like, didn't eat that much. I feel like that was part of it. I need to double check. But the other reason why it's been banned is because there's a description of the burning of the Bible.
Oh, funny.
And so parents protested that violence because of the portrayal of Christians and depictions of firemen. They were like offended by how firemen were depicted.
Wow.
So I think it's just parents that have never read the book. Yeah, who are just like I don't know. But that was in 2006, and it's continually banned by different counties for that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I would have thought it was because of like. Because I like, there's a little bit of, like, obscene language. And the woman burns, you know, she burns with the books. Like, that's pretty heavy. But, like, compared to the other books we've read, there's no sexuality. There's no, like, outright being, like, Christians are evil, like the other books we've read. Like, there's not a lot of that kind of...
Well, again, it's like they're burning a Bible, and the thesis of the book is, like, don't burn books, you know? Like...
Right, Natalie, it's
like teaching you to not burn the Bible, you know? Like, I don't know.
It's so frustrating because it's like, just read the book. Just read the book. Yeah. But I will just put a plug in for Ray Bradbury. I think Ray Bradbury is one of the best writers. Every book I've read of his, The Illustrated Man, Dandelion Wine, every book is just like, they're very fulfilling and beautiful and interesting and really speak to our time better than any other novel I've ever read. And if I had to choose a book to memorize, I would probably do Raise High the Roof Beams Carpenter by J.D. Salinger, because I love that book.
It's a good
it's really, there's like some really beautiful moments in that book. And it's like very motivating. And I'm trying to think if there's any other books that I'd be like, yes. I think it would be that. I think it would be that, or... I really, really loved, and it's just been on my mind today, The Scarlet Letter. I don't know if, I feel like that'd be weird for me to memorize that one, but I really, like, am craving it right now, so maybe, I don't know, but I think that's, like, such a beautifully written book, and such a beautiful it's a beautiful book. It speaks to so many things. I don't know. What would you memorize?
I don't know, I need to glance at my bookshelf. One thought I had was, Catcher in the Rye, because my high school students loved it. Like, it's like one they would read on their own and just love. And it's fun, you know?
Yeah, I love Catcher in the Rye.
And it's not, like, too serious.
No.
So maybe that one. For the purpose of this question, it's not, like, my favorite book. I think it's a great book, but it's not, like, if I could only read one book for the rest of my life, I wouldn't choose that one. But
which one would you
like
choose?
A good classic that everyone likes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Also, a very banned book is Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if you're going to do that, you have to memorize, like, a banned book. Like, something that's, like, maybe going to get burned out of existence, you know?
Yeah.
Which Scarlet Letter fits that. J. Salinger would fit that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good one, though. But, yeah, what is your favorite book, Natalie?
I love The History of Love by Nicole Krauss. I, like, gift that to everybody. I love it so much.
I've never read that. I've never even heard about it.
To Trevor.
Okay, I need to read it. I'm going to go see if he has it.
Yeah. And I also love... I'm, like, looking at my bookshelf for ideas. I love The Bell Jar, which is, like, another one that could be a good, like, book to memorize.
Yeah, that would be a really good book to memorize.
Yeah. I'm, like, looking. Yeah. Those are probably... some of mine right now. What about you? This is, like, always the hardest question.
I know. Honestly, J.D. Salinger is very important to me because, like, reading Catcher in the Rye was the first time I was like, oh, I think I have depression. Like, I understand Holden. Like, I now get, like, oh, he's in an asylum at the end. Huh, maybe I should get help. You know, that was, like, a big, like, light bulb thing for me.
I guess I just said that book wasn't serious, but I forgot about the ending. Yeah.
Well, it is serious, but it's also not. Like, it's like,
lighthearted.
It does it in a way
funny
that...
and, like,
Yeah, it does it in a way that's like, oh, okay. Yeah, we can work with this. So any of J.D. Salinger's books are, like, they're just, like, Franny and Zoe, all of those books are just so, like comfort books for me. But recently, I don't know. I really need to think about it. That's hard.
Yeah.
The Bell Jar is also so beautiful. I've started reading a lot of Bell Hooks, and her writing is just gorgeous. So I feel like it would be something where, like, the prose is just really pretty. Where, like, I can read one sentence and just feel like it was poetry, you know? And I feel like... No. I think it'd be Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I think that's my favorite book.
I actually haven't read that either.
I just read it this year, and it made me cry. Wow. It was, like, really beautiful and, like, empowering and just, like, heartbreaking. But it was, like, it just was really beautiful. Cool. Highly recommend it. I think that's my favorite book right now.
Cool.
Wow.
I have it on my bookshelf too, I think. So I will
read it, Natalie.
Yeah.
Read it and then tell me. I want to make. Okay, after you've read it, I want to make like a little like a thing for my wall of one of the quotes from the book, because I've looked everywhere and it's not anywhere, and I feel like it should be. But if you read it and you like the book, I'm gonna make you the quote thing for your wall as well, because it's so it's so good.
I'm excited.
I don't have any other thoughts. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think so.
I think we covered everything, honestly, from my perspective. I think Guy is just a really beautiful human being, and I feel like we all have the potential to be able to step out of our lives and start actively using our agency to become people again. Honestly, I really enjoyed talking to you about this.
It was so good to talk to you too. I always love chatting with you.
I love chatting with you. I think you're so interesting.
Burn This Book is produced by us, Nicolle and Eden Wen.
Music written by me, Nicolle, and produced and performed by my dad, Frank.